Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. As mentioned, my name is Rudy Crous, co-founder, CEO, and corporate psychologist at Compono. So a little bit about Compono. I'm just going to give you a bit of a taste of what we do because we'll lay the foundation of the case that I'm going to talk about today. So we're a technology company that help businesses understand who they should hire, who they should fire, how they develop their organization's cultures proactively, and how they develop the skills and competencies of their workforce. Our technology has three core modules: hire, engage, and develop, that through a single data bus essentially are integrated and talk to one another. So the way we kind of describe it is we are your always on 24/7 co-pilot when making people decisions. So look, when I first started Compono, when we originally created Compono, we had the corporate world in mind because let's face it, when it comes to competence, culture, and performance, these are HR topics that business leaders and HR typically really struggle with. And what we typically find, it's also the type of work that HR typically outsource. But as we found, our technology was actually really valuable, and I think more so now than ever for recruitment and recruitment agents. As I've been walking around today, all I've been hearing is how AI is changing things, and we're seeing the death of essentially the old CV, and we need to look beyond the CV to understand what makes people tick, how do you understand culture, and how do you understand the workplace more broadly. And I think for me personally, having worked on both sides of the talent equation, both on the HR side as well as the recruiter side, the thing that really stood out for me is our tech is actually, I think, more so ever for recruiters to essentially enable you to become more of that people architects of companies when HR struggles or HR can't and essentially don't know how to. I think it comes back down to the fact that when you think about HR more broadly, HR is still pretty much seen as transactional, right? HR is the internal police. They are the policies, the procedures, the writers of documentation, right? When it comes down to things like culture, competence, performance, team dynamics, people analytics, this is where HR really, really struggle. And what we learned is essentially, let alone do they have the time or the capability to perform it, they only really struggle to step back and being able to analyze these team dynamics and explore people dynamics and organizational design. And I think this is the opportunity for recruiters more broadly. With the rise of AI, smart tech, automation, we personally believe that recruiters are uniquely positioned to step in and help HR when HR can't themselves or don't know how to do it. Step in not just as suppliers of talent, but essentially step in terms of that true talent architect of high performers, something that HR and businesses can't live without. And the thing is, your clients are also demanding it more and more. Long gone are the days of, serving up those CVs. And yes, it's nice to have that transactional revenue, but they are now more than ever asking you to help real problems for them that they can't do. And as I said, a lot of the times when you talk about competence, culture, and performance, it's outsourced to management consultants. And I think that's a huge waste, right? Because when it comes to recruiters, I think recruiters are uniquely positioned over management consultants. You guys have access to people analytics, and talent. When I think about consultants, and I've been one of them, what do we have access to? Models and theories. So for me, the unfair advantage that recruiters have is people. What technology essentially enables you to do is to step beyond just knowing people and actually helping solve talent and people and team problems better than before and become that trusted advisor. Now, before we get too excited about the new definition of what recruiters are, let me ask you a couple of questions and be honest. Show of hands, who of you here have told your clients that you understand the client's team or company culture? Okay, a few of you, a few ones that might be in denial, a couple that might be lying to themselves. But look, I think no matter if it's you or you would have heard some other recruiters, think about how many times you would have said it or you would have heard that's being said by another recruiter. Now, here comes the hard question. Think about how many times you could actually prove it objectively. And I'm not talking about, the throwaway statement, the bumper sticker to essentially make the organization and a client feel, hey, they're in safe hands. I mean, objectively understand how teams work. Look, at the end of the day, recruiters are all the same, right? We all say we understand. We go to a client's office, we go for the walk around, we see a few standing desks, maybe a ping pong table, a plant sitting there needing water. You meet with the manager and have a coffee, and all of a sudden you say, you get their culture. But to me, that's only scratching the surface. That's at best the vibe or the mood of the place. That's not culture. That's not an objective evaluation or reflection of how we do things around here to achieve organizational objectives. Because, by the way, that is the definition of culture. How do we do things around here to achieve objectives? Are we a risk-taking organization? Are we more risk-averse? Do we focus on people versus processes? Are we more long-term focused or are we more reactive? Do we focus on a lot of policies and procedures to guide people, or are we more laissez-faire? That is true culture. So if we all agree that culture is the way we do things around here, of course it's very, very heavily influenced by people's preferences, individuals' personalities. So what is personality? Well, personality is essentially your preference to want to do certain types of work over another type of work, prioritizing certain things over other things, and potentially even overlooking or essentially avoiding certain types of work. So if individuals have personalities, when they come together to form a team, you get team personalities. And as teams come together, you form the company culture. But at the end of the day, these preferences essentially drive what people want to do and what they want to avoid, and essentially the way we do things around here. But for most recruiters, we never really get close enough to objectively evaluate and understand team dynamics. Now listen, I'm not talking about the personality assessments, the psychometric tests that you guys would typically do, right? I'm sure a lot of you would go, Rudy, we've heard it all before. There's psychometric assessments. We use ACER, we use, SHL and so forth. Okay, very nice. But what is the benchmark you're using? A lot of times what we're seeing is you will evaluate a candidate's personality on the outside. I call it the outside in model. Evaluate their personality, hoping that when they join the organization, it works. What we're talking about is the inside out model. Truly understand the things teams, individuals prioritize, what they deprioritize, and potentially miss out on. That is where the kernel of truth really lies, because you can use that information to essentially, at the top of the funnel, bring the right people into the team. And I think as recruiters, we're really good at KPIs. We're really good at understanding technical skills and understanding role requirements, but we're not all that good when it comes to dysfunctional teams, team misalignment or team alignment, or more broadly, more dysfunction. And I think here's the thing, clients are starting to notice it too. They want that management consulting aspect from recruiters. Why? Because you understand people, you understand talent. The next step is how can you use technology to actually make you more like a management consultant and embed yourself. And I think years gone by, I would have argued that technology doesn't really exist for you to do that just yet. But in the modern world, AI, automation, that actually enables you to do so. The key here for you is to think beyond the role and think about you becoming that talent architect. So look, we all know recruitment's evolving. As I said, I've been walking around all morning, and what I've been hearing is a lot of AI and the death of the CV and floating CV. And I'm sure a lot of you still really rely on the CV, and perhaps some of you might even float a CV here or there. I won't ask you to raise your hand. But the point being, essentially, this is transactional revenue. It's quick churn and burn kind of money. If you're looking for more longer term partnerships, you have to look beyond the role and become that strategic partner, that essential management consultant that can help HR when HR can't help themselves. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I've got a bit of a case study. How do I go back? So we recently worked with an RPO, a client that was embedded in a mine site in central Queensland. The mine site had a safety and training department that looked absolutely great on paper, was good at policies, writing systems, procedures, sitting behind the computer punching out work like clockwork. On the surface, you'd say they're high performing. But what was happening internal to the organization, they had a terrible reputation. They were seen as distant. People didn't want to actually engage with them. They were seen as bureaucratic, disconnected, out of touch with their stakeholders, the people that they're actually there to serve. And the head of safety and training knew this, but she didn't know what to do about it. And the HR team didn't know how to fix it. And this is where the recruiter actually stepped in. So having used Compono and our suite of technology, he's been able to use our technology to hire operational staff and was able to lift his view from the recruiter to become that trusted advisor and remove the recruiter lens. And the way he did it was he was able to show this head of safety and training how to compare the team's current and desired culture based on their organization's objectives and understand where there was misalignment, but then also understand how the personalities in the teams were coming together to actually help or hinder them to achieve their objectives. See, here's what we've done is we've taken academic theory around team design and personality. And what academic theory essentially tells you is there's 8 key types of work all high-performing teams must be able to do, from coordinating work to doing work to evaluating each other to essentially pioneering, challenging the status quo to selling what you're doing and weighing up options. High-performing teams are effective at providing coverage across all these 8 key types of work. However, because of our personalities, we've got certain preferences for performing these types of work. Now imagine you've got a group of people coming together. What do you typically see? You typically see hiring managers hire the same type of people over and over again. So they might be really good at one aspect of this high-performing team theory, but terrible at the next, deprioritizing it or potentially even missing it. So with the recruiter's help, the head of safety was actually able to run a quick, fast, simple diagnostic to really understand what was going on. And what they found was actually really revealing. The team was stacked with doers. The team was stacked with auditors, goes out to meet the team and serve their clients. There is one variance on this. They had one evaluator. So the evaluator is the type of person that actually do want to go out and talk to team members. But guess what happened? They were browbeaten to essentially get stuck behind the computer because they were overwhelmed by the doers and the auditors that thought what they were doing was the right thing. As it turns out, they were doing a lot of things, just not the right things. So this is now where the recruiter really stepped in and essentially came to the forefront. He made 3 key recommendations. Number 1, hire for diversity. And it wasn't diversity about race, gender, religion. It was diversity of thought, bringing more auditors, bringing more campaigners to essentially balance the team. Number 2, improve the way the current team was operating. And how did they do that? Well, to force the team essentially through management mechanisms and systems to provide coverage to more of that pioneering, innovation, campaigning aspect. So their KPIs were also tied back to essentially being able to see, are you going out beyond your computer? Are you meeting with the workforce? So forcing, the leader needed to force essentially that current team. And thirdly, what the recruiter recommended was essentially changing the evaluator's role to be the champion, to be the face of this team, to go out and engage with the workforce, to essentially also report back to management. And as I said, be that face, be that engagement officer for the safety department. So what do you reckon was the result? Fantastic. Well, the team didn't just improve, they transformed completely. They still did the work, but it was the work the company thought was important. It was the work that their clients wanted to work on. So they were still producing policies and procedures, but it was in collaboration, in unison, and essentially consulted their clients and their workforce. So guess what happened? Well, their reputation soared, conflict between the evaluator and the doers and the auditors improved because they were very clear on what their roles were, and their morale lifted as well. That evaluator that was browbeaten all of a sudden found energy, found joy. If it sparks joy, do it, right? So they all essentially banded together and were a transformation based on a simple recommendation. So what happened to the recruiter? Well, the recruiter wasn't just seen as the recruiter. They became the trusted advisor. They also ran multiple sessions with other departments supporting HR. So they became HR's right-hand person. And what ended up happening was they ended up bringing in more recruiters to essentially report to support that function. So here's the point, and I know I'm running out of time here. You can do this too. You don't need to be an organizational psychologist. You don't need to be a management consultant with all the academia behind you and the systems and processes. With the right technology, you can essentially evolve how your role is being seen as the recruiter to be that strategic architect of team design. And here's the thing, to remain relevant and to essentially become irreplaceable, you have to support HR in the things that they don't want to do or can't do or don't have the capability to do so. So next time you say and you understand a company's culture, don't guess. Next time you send a candidate, don't float them, embed yourself. And next time you think that you're just a recruiter, think beyond the role and become the architect of high-performing teams.